go ahead and call the meeting of the May 1st, 2025 TRPA Hearings Officer meeting to order. It's 2 p.m. My name is Marsha Birch, and I will be serving as the Hearings Officer today. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
That's fine.
All right, we just have one item, so I'll go ahead and approve the agenda as it was posted. The next item are public interest comments for no action. Any member of the public who wishes to address the hearings officer on any item that is not listed as a public hearing item on the agenda may do so at this time. Public comments on any public hearing item will be taken at the time those agenda items are heard. The hearings officer is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not listed on the agenda. All right, Catherine, if you could ask if there are any public interest comments in the room.
Does anyone want to comment on a non-agenda item? No? Okay. There are no comments in the room.
All right, and how about online?
If any member on the public joining online would like to make a comment on a non-agendized item, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you have dialed in. There are no hands raised to comment.
All right, thank you. Then I'll go ahead and close the public interest comments. And the fourth item is announcement of appeal rights. Any decision of the hearings officer is appealable to the TRPA governing board. The notice of appeal, which can be found on TRPA's website, and associated fees must be filed within 21 days of the hearings officer's decision. All right, and now we can go to our hearing item. We have one item on the agenda today. It's item 5A, MH Tahoe Residence LLC, addition modification, 9898 Lake Street, Placer County, California. Assessor's parcel numbers 090-321-006, 090-321-024, and 090-321-025. TRPA file number ERSP 2024-1780. And this is Jennifer Self's item.
Thank you, Marsha. Jen Self for the record. I am the TRPA point of contact for the project and would be the issuing planner for this permit if approved at the hearings officer today. This is a project that was reviewed by an outsourced consultant, WBA, Jesse Walker. We do have Jesse on the phone in case there's any questions that come up that I'm unable to answer. And we also have the applicant's representative here today, and I believe he has a brief presentation for the project as well. So I'm going to be providing an overview, and then we'll bring up a few extra items at the conclusion of that. We can go to the next slide. So just for context, this project is located at 9898 Lake Street, which is in Placer County. It's in close proximity to the California-Nevada state line and mirrors the close to Crystal Bay. We can go to the next slide. The property does have 2 verified single-family residential units of use. These were verified as legally existing. The project would be to do a partial demolition and modification to the primary residence that is closest to the lake. And then it would be a demolition and rebuild of the caretaker's residence and garage. If we could go to the next slide. The project is before a hearings officer today. So per TRPA Code Chapter 2, any addition, reconstruction, or demolition to a historic resource does require review and approval of the hearings officer. So that is why we are here today. That's what triggered this hearing. Because this particular property is recognized as a historic resource, so the primary residence, and because it's a partial demolition and reconstruction. As mitigation for that work on the property owner was required to complete and has submitted a resource recovery plan per TRPA code. We do have that on file, and that's part of the record. That was completed by qualified architectural historians. And that documents the existing conditions and the proposed modifications to the structure and acts as a formal recordation of the property before it is altered. So we have that on file, and that is a part of the approval. In addition to that, the property owner has taken into consideration the historic character of the property. So there is a partial demolition of the historic resource. What will be reconstructed, the property owner has proposed to keep that in line with the historic character of the property. Because it is lakefront, was required to go through the scenic analysis, and so we have that on file, and that is part of the staff summary as well. If we could go to the next slide. These photos are actually taken from the applicant's representative. It's the existing condition of the maid residence. And then the secondary image is what they are proposing to be reconstructed. You can go to the next slide. That may be the end. So as far as TRPA comments go, just wanted to make note for the record that we did receive a public comment letter by email this morning. And then there was a condition that TRPA staff did want to include in the permit. At this time, I'll ask the hearings officer, would you like to have that conversation now? Or I believe there's a few remarks that the applicant's representative wanted to make as well on the project.
No, why don't we go ahead and get the presentation from the applicant? And then we can move on to that issue.
Sounds good. I'll turn it over to you, Nick.
All right. Good afternoon, Marcia. Pleasure to be here in front of the hearings officer again. Always a great time. Thanks for having us. And so really, just want to echo everything Jen said. I think she did a great job in her presentation and covered the high level items. Per TRPA code, the reason we're here is because of the historic resource on site. And I think what's so phenomenal, and you could just kind of flip through the pages, I'd like not too worried, because really, wanted to highlight a few things. Really what this is doing is we're paying absolute respect to the historical character and quality of the site. As you can see, some of the sites, the site is in desperate need of some TLC, just, kind of basics, to the point where, working with Jen and other members of TRPA staff, we were able to get a partial demo QE for some of the decks and subsurface elements of the residence to get a structural inspection because of some of the serious concerns about quality elements with the existing residents. And so, when you take account that, really as we worked in the design team, and maybe you could just stop right here, I think this is great. And we have the project's architect here as well, if any questions architecturally exist. But speaking, and giving some love to the architect, I think they did an amazing job with looking at the historic character, what is kind of anticipated and expected with, residential design today. For example, the bedrooms on the existing cabin are all exterior loading. So, if you had to use the bathroom in December, you're walking outside to use the bathroom, which I don't think I have to probably get into too much detail is why not preferable for people in a residential setting. And so really the design is to correct, the structural issues, correct some of the design issues that didn't exist while paying ultimate respect to the historic character of the property. And so I would say, in addition to the resource recovery plan we've developed, in some ways, the way the architecture and the project's unfolded, that's a resource recovery effort in itself, just due to the respect, homage, and how closely it resembles the existing condition. And I think you can see that on the screen today. And that's why I wanted to take a minute to add a little bit more flavor to Jen's presentation, just again to kind of represent how closely and how important it was for us to maintain the historical character on site. So although there'll be a partial demolition, the way we look at it is not a change from what exists, but just ensuring that what exists can exist for the next 100 years instead of continuing to deteriorate. And so, you can kind of flip through the rest of the pictures. That's basically what it's going to cover. Next photo is Jen, already included in her presentation. And so really, really excited for this project. Again, I think it could be a model for, examples of how people do kind of demolition on historic sites and kind of bring rebirth to those places. As Jen also mentioned, there was a comments received this morning. And so, did want to touch base on those as well. Always important to remember we're here for this historic element, but do want to touch base on those. And so fundamentally, this property is not gonna be used or not being considered for any kind of commercial use. No commercial use is proposed, no commercial use is allowed, no engagement has been, moved forward to consider that as an option. And so really what we want to do is restore this amazing historical property, bring back its luster, like I said, for the next 100 years. So it's a great project. Again, the project's architect is here, and so we're happy to answer any questions, but really do appreciate your time today, and look forward to discussing this this project.
Thank you, Nick. I do have a question. This is a small thing. I noticed there was a color palette there that looked like it was more of sort of neutral brown tones. Will that be the new color of the structure?
Yeah, as I'm sure you understand, the light blue is not a TRPA preferred color. And so, yeah, to that color palette on the bottom. And Stephen can kind of discuss kind of which goes where in greater depth, but really it's bringing it all into kind of the patterns you would expect, the earth tones, the darker browns, grays, blacks, and so forth. And so it gets a further blend into the environment, which also I would say, in addition to the landscaping and kind of the luster that's going to be provided from a screening perspective, the color changes as well will really do a lot to improve the scenic character in comparison with the existing condition.
Yes, thank you. And this was helpful. I did have some questions about, the visual on this, and this has helped a lot. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll go back to Jen, so we can address some other issues that have come up.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. So there was 2 issues that we wanted to bring up. The one was we've been in coordination with our code compliance team. We have Steve Sweet, who is the department manager for code compliance, and talking with the applicant this morning. We've learned that there is an active violation on the property for work that was done last July of 2024, work in the shore zone. If you would like to discuss kind of more in detail of what that violation is, I have some notes here, but it may be better to hear directly from Steve on that. There is a draft settlement that would be going before the governing board this month in May. And so we wanted to add a condition that would be a prior to acknowledgement condition within this permit. And we have the draft language of what that would read. Would you like me to read that now?
I have that language, Jen, but I'm going to go ahead and have you read it for everyone else's benefit.
Okay, so the proposal that we have with the draft permit that was included in the packet today for the hearings officer would be to add condition 3.0, and it would read, prior to acknowledgement, comma, the permittee shall meet all required conditions of the settlement agreement per TRPA file number CODE 2025-0019. Period. The applicant received a cease and desist for unauthorized removal of vegetation within the shore zone resulting in a violation and subsequent settlement resolution. Period. I want to share that with you when I read. That was what we were proposing.
Yeah, I guess just a couple of questions how that might play out in kind of real terms. And so, as kind of sure we all know the construction timeline in Tahoe, so I won't bore anyone with kind of those details. And so, this is obviously getting a building department approval with Placer County. And so when we sign the settlement agreement, and that'll probably be a couple days out now, and we, agree for the fee, would we be able to acknowledge at that point, or we'd still have to wait for the governing board, and actually when the date is this month? You see what I'm saying? Like, can we satisfy it early? Because, you know what I mean? If we just want to move forward, or you see what I'm going to, not wanting to kind of miss a few weeks, if, we're in agreement can pay and all that kind of good stuff before the governing board.
So you're asking if you could start construction once we have an agreed, a signed settlement agreement.
Yeah.
Or acknowledge.
Like get the signed settlement agreement, even, we can even kind of discuss, payment as well, but you know what I'm saying? Before because then, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And we're happy to kind of work through in that way, so you feel comfortable with that, but that would be ideal.
The draft condition that we wrote up said that the conditions would have to be met prior to acknowledgement.
The conditions of the settlement agreement, we could change it to the settlement
Yeah,
has to be.
this is, I'm Graham St. Michelle for the record, General Counsel. Settlement agreements do need to be approved by the governing board, the TRPA governing board, so that is a little bit of a wrinkle there. I'm trying to think if we can think about how to work around that, but you know, the governing board meeting is on the 28th. We would need, you know, the parties can agree to a settlement to the terms, but we'll need the governing board's approval before we can, you know, rely on that settlement agreement.
And I guess it's just in terms of that, how we've crafted, and maybe it's your question, given kind of the legality of that, is there a way we could craft, you know what I mean, where we would reach some kind of, you know, immediate kind of through the signing of the agreement first, and then anything else that would be needed, again, to allow for acknowledgement while the governing board process commences, so that way we're not kind of killing those 3 weeks.
And your idea, yeah, I think we can probably do that. It's just, this kind of came up this morning. So and I haven't had a chance to work on that language. It's kind of awkward to do that here in the middle of the meeting. So I don't know, you know, if Marcia, if you have any ideas, if you want to try us to do that in real time. Otherwise, I mean, we could just, you know, I think I probably would be okay or comfortable with the permit. You know, this is just my recommendation. It's ultimately Marcia for you as a hearings officer, but it could be something like, you know, the condition would read something of the parties signing off, agreeing to terms on the settlement agreement, and, you know, and then like allowing that's the condition in the permit, for the permit to be acknowledged. And then we can just say, make a notation in there that, you know, the governing board needs to approve the settlement agreement. But, you know, the parties agreeing and signing off to terms would be an acceptable condition for the permit acknowledgement.
I mean, that would definitely work on our end, Marcia, that whatever's kind of comfortable with you, because.
So-
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just have a question. What would happen if the governing board does not approve the settlement? I'm not saying this is a likely outcome. I'm just asking the question. If the governing board didn't approve the proposed settlement agreement.
I mean, I don't know if you guys would know, like if the governing board has ever kind of not moved forward with the settlement agreement reached by staff, and it, you know, you could include some like a sentence if it's not approved by the government, you know, something to kind of safeguard against that. I think the likelihood is really, really low, but happy to include like a safeguard as well.
Yeah, what are you guys going to do in the 3 weeks? What will happen?
And so, I mean, some of it, please, jump in, Stephen, Nicole, but, really like like most sites, it's sites prep, site demo. Some of that's already been covered, I think, too, as a little bit of a safeguard with that QE approval we had gotten, a few months back. And so, it really kind of starts in that space. And some of it's going to be dependent, as I mentioned, Placer County is going to be issuing their Associated Building Department approval. And so it's, we're pushing them as quickly as possible as well, but, delays in that space, could also kind of limit what we want to do. I mean, we would want to do as much as possible, just given kind of, limitations and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Could we add that if a settlement is not reached, then the work would cease until then all work.
Yeah, I think that's what we have to do, is something.
Until a settlement.
Yeah, like some kind of a notation. That if the governing board doesn't approve the settlement agreement at the end of the month at the next meeting, that, what would be the right word, Marcia? The permit would be held in abeyance, or some kind of, work would stop. It's really, honestly,
Yeah.
It's putting us in a tough position to do it like this.
Yes.
I'll be clear. I mean, we could have probably addressed this differently. Wendy, you have something to say?
This is Wendy Jepson for the record. I would not recommend trying, I would recommend doing it the right way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned about other times happening. I
Mhm.
mean, I know that they have the best of intentions here, but I just want to be careful with this, so.
Yeah, I mean, based on, that input there from Wendy, I mean, this is difficult to do in real time at a meeting like this. So as you can see, we're trying to be responsive, but it's really gonna be kind of for Marcia, I'm kind of hearing some hesitation. And, yeah, I just would add that we should have probably done this and dealt with this earlier. And I'm not sure why it really happened, came out this morning without enough time to sort of, handle this, so. I guess that would be, I'd probably make the recommendation that Wendy had then and say, it's gonna be have approval from the governing board before the permit acknowledges, or permit acknowledgement.
I would tend to agree with that. And I have some thoughts on how we might be able to frame that condition. And I understand that there's, there are 3 weeks where there will be this missed opportunity for getting some work done, but I just don't see a way around this possibility, even if it's a slim possibility that the governing board doesn't approve the settlement agreement, and then that would have to go back. And I think the other question in my mind would be, if the governing board doesn't approve the settlement agreement, what changes would then be made to the settlement agreement in order to, gain governing board approval, and whether or not that would change any of the other conditions in this project. So my suggestion would be to say, prior to acknowledgement, the permittee shall execute the settlement agreement per TRPA file number CODE 2025-0019, pay the required penalty, and receive approval from the TRPA governing board. I think all 3 of those things need to occur before acknowledgement. And I'm happy to hear input from anyone who would like to comment on that proposed condition.
Marcia, this is Jen Self, staff.
Yes.
I was kind of making scribbly notes on the draft permit condition that we have. So if you have that language that you're comfortable with, I just ask that if you could send that to staff, that'd be great.
Yes, I can do that. I wanted to discuss it a bit here and see if there were other concerns. I think a second sentence should be added that if no settlement agreement is reached and approved by the TRPA governing board, the permit will not be acknowledged. If there isn't a settlement of this matter, if for some reason there, are last minute, cold feet and the settlement agreement doesn't move forward, then we'll have an open code case. And if there is an open code case, I don't think that this permit should be acknowledged. And I don't necessarily think we need to have the additional detail in the condition regarding the cease and desist. I think the reference to the code file is enough, but I'm happy to hear, Graham, if you have other thoughts on that.
No, I think, Marcia, the way that you recited that will work.
I mean, it's a very it's concise, and it's very clear. It essentially just says that this settlement agreement needs to be executed, the penalty paid, and the governing board approval in place before acknowledgement.
Can I just confirm a process question? We pay the fee after TRP or governing board approval, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could pay it right after the approval.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was kind of thinking, but like, okay.
And is
We could get you started probably the day after the.
entrance in every area.
And then for the governing board says, yeah, you're good, then we pay the fee. Yes.
So I have a question for, possibly this is for Steve. Is the settlement agreement in its final form as it will be presented to the governing board?
Pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe some final, like a few changes. I've been waiting to hear back from that, the applicant.
Yeah, and so, just to touch on real quickly, there was no, kind of intent, obviously, to bring this kind of together. It was, because of these elements were existing in the spring, there was kind of a spring kind of reality to when we wanted to go out there. And then also, So, based on those kind of things, just as timeline goes, so, definitely, Nolwen's intent to kind of put, staff in this position and really, speaking on behalf of the whole team, really, thankful for everyone to be able to kind of brainstorm a solution. And, the solution works for us. I think, talking with Steve this morning with the whole kind of, team for 9898, no, fundamental disagreement really with the settlement agreement, kind of those elements. And so it was really just kind of timelines for different things and different schedules. And so that put us in this awkward position. So I don't have really any concern like that this closes out cleanly by the end of the month.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for your input. I think it sounds like we have a permit condition that will work. It will achieve the agency's goals and also just present a slight delay for the applicant. Okay, so unless anyone has anything additional to add to this discussion regarding the violation, I'd like to go ahead and open this up to public comment.
If any member of the public in the room would like to make a comment, you can just come forward to the table here.
It's right here?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Ann Nichols, Brockway Point Homeowners Association, 52-year resident in Brockway. Been there a long time, know how this all looked. And, I guess it was hard to tell with this notice, but I guess they're adding 1,500 square feet about to the main home. They're adding a caretaker's cottage that's 30 feet high, where the existing one is, I don't know, it's just like a 2-car garage that was converted, I guess. So it's really quite a change in character, especially when we received this advertising piece from McWinney, the owners of the Calneva. I asked Jennifer, who was the applicant here, and was it McWinney, and you didn't answer. You said it was MLH or whatever that name was, but the advertising piece says Fairwinds Estate. McWinney purchased the lakefront, 5,000 square feet, that's being renovated and designed by Kelly Whistler. McWinney is in the process of obtaining a short-term rental license so the estate can be used for private events and nightly rentals, which kind of goes against everything Nick just said, unless there's something I'm missing about the use. It's really like a commercial lodging use, which is completely, scares the heck out of the neighborhood. As you know, Speedboat is super congested, less than 2 lanes. It's just 1 lane in many places. Gets a ton of use by the public, and we're very concerned because obviously the Calneva is just a couple blocks away. Are they going to be going in and out with buses and venue? Are they going to be selling liquor? And I know you don't want to talk about it. You just want to talk about this addition, and even the addition and the change. I mean, this 30-foot high caretakers, I'm not sure why that has to be the case, but maybe I missed it in the application. It's pretty lengthy. What I'd like to see, since we need to do the settlement agreement with governing board, I'd like to see this go in front of governing board, because there's a lot more involved here than what meets the eye. And I think that the neighborhood and the Brockway Point HOA is super concerned. I sent a lot of questions into Jennifer and she answered, but she wouldn't answer a lot of the questions. We go, there's just, I can't talk about this, about the commercial use. And the concern is, of course, that, McWinney, they're real operators. They're hotel operators. It's going to be, I guess, the proper hotel, which the community is very excited about. But, we're going to have a real operator using the Fairwinds Estate and putting people in their venues. I understand they're going to be selling memberships. I heard something nutty, like 100,000 each, to be able to use their new 60,000 square foot spa with, plunge pools and indoor pickleball. We're scared about the impact on the congestion, the neighborhood. And we just don't think this has been really thoroughly vetted or really transparently presented to the neighbors. Thank you very much. you want a copy of
I
this?
can add that, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public in the room who'd like to make a comment? Yes, please come forward. So you have 10 agendas there then.
I'm sorry, did I take some of your stuff? I did.
No, that's fine.
So I prepared my statement with the knowledge that they are planning to do events. And
Excuse me, would you mind stating your name for the record, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, Gail.
That's
my name
okay.
is Gail. My name is Gail High. We are part of the family that owns the property right next to it. This will influence, will make some real problems for us depending on how it's handled. The idea, well, in fact, let me just, our family owns the property that is immediately adjacent to Fairwinds. We feel betrayed and ambushed. We have been constantly assured by the McQuinney group that they would not be using Fairwinds as part of their Calneva development. When questions, they replied that they didn't know what they would be doing with Fairwinds. They might just resell it, that their emphasis was on the Calneva itself, and that in fact, they wouldn't want to do anything that would lure their guests away from the Calneva's amenities. Then we received a TRPA notice that sneakily implies that they were just removing rotten foundations and restoring some parts of the building in comfortingly the same style as the original building. Nothing to see here, folks, which is why we've only had a couple of days to rally our neighbors to what we now see as a real threat to our enjoyment of our properties. Now it's become clear that what they are hoping to do is a commercial use, an event center, which absolutely is not appropriate or legal for our small residentially zoned neighborhood. It seems to become acceptable in this day and age to lie your way to whatever you want. Please do not reword this morally wrong practice. An event center is not appropriate for our small neighborhood for all sorts of very valid reasons and should not be allowed, especially not without honesty and openness with those whose properties and lives would be severely impacted. I would note that the violation of having cut all those trees, which they knew they couldn't do that, they have lots of money. It makes it just, well, that's okay, we'll pay this, they'll fine us, we'll pay us. The fine is nothing to them. The violation of of what is supposed to be there, that it is supposed to be residential, is. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. All right, do we have any additional comments?
We have one hand raised online so far. Get my timer back. Oh, that hand just went down. Okay, if any members of the public online would like to make a comment, please raise your hand now in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 if you have called in. And I would ask, if you have your hand raised, just leave it up until you have a chance to speak. The first hand up is Lindsay Miles. Lindsay, please unmute to make your comments.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's see, can I put video on? Maybe not. I don't know if I can put video on, but yeah, I'm also a neighbor of Gail's. I live right across the street from this property. So, I mean, I want to reiterate what they said, but I also would like to understand the process. What is the legality around how they use this property? How can we be assured? They can say one thing now, but obviously it's a massive property. And I mean, concerning for us is a 33-foot building that they're putting directly in front of us. But also, how is it going to be used, and how are we reassured that later, once it's built, they can't just flip the use?
So Lindsay, why don't you go ahead and finish your comments? I'm going to have some questions for staff and for the applicant after our comment period, and I think hopefully your questions will be answered.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I guess then you know, as you can tell by our comments, we're not sure what's going on. We've been told multiple things. We get letters that say one thing. We have marketing documents, which you've seen. I think they brought a copy of it, which says they're going to have a private club. So what is the process to get to the bottom of the use? And how do you contractually hold them to that use? Is there a way to do that to protect the neighbors who are across the street and next door, who will be hugely affected, and everyone on the street, if this becomes a private club or an addition to their commercial space up above, which our street cannot handle? So what's the process, and how can you assure the neighborhood, either contractually or legally?
All right,
Okay.
Lindsay, I think we've heard your questions, and thank you for your comments. Anyone else?
Yes, one more hand raised. Brooksley Wiley, please unmute to make your comment.
Good afternoon. I don't want to take too much of your time. I would basically reiterate the concerns that Lindsay Miles raised. I am significantly impacted by the proposed project. I am an owner of 9880, which is right next door, and looks over at the property and at the dock. And I'm also the owner of 61 Speedboat, which is at the corner of Speedboat and Lake, and is kitty corner to where the new caretaker's building will be. I have a vested interest in the integrity of the point and actually appreciate an upgrade to those facilities. They have fallen into a state of significant disrepair, and there is an aesthetic to the plans for the main house that is very appealing. I do have concerns about the size of the proposed caretaker's cottage. I think it's going to change the character of that area very significantly. But my primary concern is how we can rely on and how we can hold the developers to the representations that they've made to this board, that they are not going to change the use or seek a change in the use, and that this will only be a private residence available in the way that is available to anyone who has a private residence for rental, perhaps to a single family, but hold it to that so that it does not become a commercial enterprise. So I would appreciate the committee addressing what the boundaries look like to hold the developers to the representations that they've made in their application for this permit, that it will be a residential use application.
Right, thank you, Brooksley.
We had one
Okay.
more. Sorry, Marcia, we had one more hand go up.
Okay.
First name on Zoom is Tanya. Tanya, if you could unmute and state your full name for the record, and then make your comment.
Hi, my name is Tanya Miller, and I am the owner of 9875 Pilot Circle. My house looks right over at Fairwinds, and I just want to express too my great concern that there's a marketing piece out that says membership and amenities and talks about Fairwinds as a commercial piece of property. This neighborhood has always been a residential only neighborhood. I would like concrete assurances that this project on Fairwinds will not become a commercial piece of property. I am in great support. I would like to support the company on recreating Calneva and proper hotels. I would like to be able to help support that, but I want to make sure that our neighborhood itself and Fairwinds are protected from the commercialism of a hotel. I hope that you will really make sure that we as neighbors are protected from what feels like the inevitable. We'll start by saying we don't want anything and we're not going to change anything, and then magic corporations and with strength and money are able to make changes that just over time slowly happen. I would like assurances that this will not happen and this will remain a residential neighborhood, with that being only a single family dwelling without commercial events. That's all. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tanya. All right, do we have any other comments?
No, there are no more hands raised to comment.
All right, thank you, Catherine. So I think what I'd like to do, I would like to bring this back to staff, and I think it may be that all of you might have some input on the questions that I have. So I think Jen has done a good job of explaining in the staff report that, this is a building permit, right? This is a building permit for a residential structure. So what we're doing today is we're not evaluating a change in use. So the allowed use in this area plan is residential. So I just want to reassure everyone that there isn't a use being proposed and there isn't a use being approved here today. It's just the modifications to the structure. So, and that's the type of permit that's been applied for in this case. What I would like to say is just maybe, Jen, if you could just reiterate, I mean, going through the staff report, looking at the findings, it appears that everything that is being proposed in terms of the modifications is consistent with our code.
For Jen Self, for the record, this project, as I mentioned, was reviewed by outsource review planner. However, TRPA does review once we get those draft permit and the staff summary back from that firm or the individual to make sure it is complying with the code and the local plan. And so I did complete the review for this. The parcel does have 2 residential units on it. That is what is being proposed by the permittee and the applicant to continue the residential use. So there are a few other permissible uses within this district of the Placer County area plan. However, if there is a change of use to anything other than residential, that would require approval and a permit.
And Jen, the process for that approval and permit would be, I mean, you could just kind of give a general idea of that if you could.
Sure, general application, and Nick is familiar with this process. A change of use requires a TRPA application and a permit. We are evaluating the change of use from one to another, including traffic, ingress, egress, and other compliance measures under the code for the new use.
And I think just to add to that, Jen, and again, to make it incredibly clear, there is absolutely no change of use being sought now or into the future, but just I think everyone raises important questions. And so it's a lengthy approval process to get a change in use, which would result in at least 3 public reviews and approvals at the county level and 3 reviews and approves at the TRPA level from RPIC, APC, and then the governing board. So these type of things just can't sneak up on you. Again, it's not proposed, but they can never sneak up on you. And you would have at least 6 more bites at that apple in the event anything was proposed, whether it's in this location or, again, it's not in this location, but just kind of in the theoretical.
So Nick, while you're providing some information for us, maybe you could address the flyer that they've received regarding memberships or the proposal to do short-term rentals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I personally haven't seen the advertisement. So just, I've been interacting with the teams both at the Fairwinds and at Calneva regularly, more than regularly, multiple times every single day. And they're a phenomenal team, actually. And I think a great testament to our community and really breathing new life into it. And so from the previous owner writing the due diligence report that allowed the current property owner to buy the property, I was explicit then as I'm explicit now, there's no commercial opportunity on this site. That was, my great take home when the former property owner was looking to sell it until now. There's no commercial activity. And then, furthermore, the limitations of the site are residential, and I think another commenter stated this, and those, rights afforded to other single-family residential owners in Placer County.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I have, is about short-term rental. What is the approval process to be able to use a residential structure for a short-term rental in Placer County?
So Placer County is, each jurisdiction does it differently, and I I don't want to speak to that. I know all the intricacies of the STR permitting process in Placer County. They operate under a cap. And so, you know, there is a lot of, you know, kind of building code kind of requirements in terms of, you know, how the project is developed and so forth. But it's governed by Placer County. They operate under a cap in terms of the volume of, you know, STRs that can exist within the boundaries. And then they have their regular ordinances. And I apologize. I don't know, Jen, if anyone else knows, but I can't recall the specifics.
But there is a permitting process.
Absolutely.
And do you know whether or not the applicant is intending to go through the permitting process to be able to do short-term rentals in this?
The applicant, so the primary role for the house would be to look towards a short-term rental, similar that's allowed, and then ultimately be used predominantly via the property owner.
Thank you. Okay. So I don't think that I have any additional questions, and I do want to thank everyone who came and commented today and raised your concerns about the use of the property. Again, I want to assure everyone that this permit does not authorize anything other than residential use. This is essentially it's a building permit for the modification of the structure. Our review is to determine whether or not it's consistent with the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency codes and regulations. And in this case, staff has gone through the, you know, architectural proposal. I can make the findings with respect to the historic resource and the recovery plan that's been prepared, and the really careful architectural work to be consistent with that historic character that existed, you know, prior to these modifications. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read the condition that I would like to have included, and I will email this to staff. And this will be the new condition regarding the violation. Prior to acknowledgement, the permittee shall execute the settlement agreement per TRPA file number CODE 2025-0019, pay the required penalty, and receive approval from the TRPA governing board. If no settlement agreement is reached and approval by the TRPA governing board, the permit will not be acknowledged. So that will be the new condition. And I just want to ask if staff has any questions about that language.
I do not have any questions about that language.
Okay. And the applicant is willing to have that condition included without any opposition?
No, absolutely. And again, just, you know, really appreciate everybody's willingness to kind of, given the uniqueness, to kind of coordinate this now by providing assurances. So no additional comments except thanks for the process.
All right. And okay, then I'm gonna go, I will close the public comment. I'm going to, I don't have any additional questions for staff, and I will take action. I will approve the findings contained in the staff report, and I will approve the project based on the staff summary, the record evidence, subject to conditions contained in the draft TRPA permit and the additional condition that I read into the record just a few minutes ago. All right. Thank you, everyone. And we will be adjourned.